Hello and a very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching COVID-19 India Fights Back. I'm Frank Rausen Pereira. A new study has found that post-COVID-19 infection antibody response actually scales down instead of building immunity over time. This was witnessed more among the elderly group than other groups. The researchers at the Imperial College in London tested more than 3,65,000 people between June 20th and September 28th. Analysis of finger prick tests carried out at home between 20th June and 28th September found that the number of people testing positive dropped by 26.5% across the study period from almost 6% to 4.4%. There was a fall in antibodies by 26%, which was greater among those above the age of 65 as compared to the younger population. Author of the study, Professor Paul Elliott, said that our study shows that over time, there is a reduction in the proportion of people testing positive for antibodies. It remains unclear what level of immunity antibodies provide or how long this immunity lasts. Antibody provides great protection to the body, but T cells contribute to the immunity too. Thus, one might reserve their judgment on the direct correlation between the fall of antibody and immunity. However, the research dashes hope of herd immunity being a possible answer to the lockdown, especially when it's quite clear now to all that the COVID-19 virus is here for a long haul. Antibodies are a key part of the body's immune defenses and stop viruses from getting inside the body's cells. In this edition of India Fights Back, we will analyze antibodies and COVID-19. Joining me on the program today are Dr. Meenu Bajpai, Professor, Transfusion Medicine, Institute of Liver and Biliary Sciences; PVM Lakshmi, Professor of Epidemiology, Department of Community Medicine and School of Public Health, PGI MER, Chandigarh; and Anil Gurtu, Head, Department of Medicine, Lady Hardinge Medical College, New Delhi. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of COVID-19 India Fights Back. All right, Dr. Gurtu, let me begin the program with you first. Let's first try and understand and analyze the role of antibodies in fighting COVID-19.
Antibodies are not the only way the body's immunity fights an intruder like SARS-CoV-2 virus. There are at least two limbs to the immunity, the immune response. One, what we call the innate. It is a very ancient and primitive immune response system that we inherit through genetics. It is common to all the life forms, from the single cell bacteria, viruses, to the multicellular organisms as big as us or other animals. Probably this innate is the first line of defense. It is blind. It attacks based on some pattern recognitions. It is as old as life, 3.5 billion years or so. And it is shared by everything. So this is the first line of defense based on just pattern recognition. Recognize, attack, and activate signals, alarms to activate the rest of the second arm, which is called the adaptive immunity, which is specific to the multicellular organisms like us and like other mammals and vertebrates and all. This has developed later, and it has two features which mark it out. One, it is very specific. Antibody response to chickenpox will attack only chickenpox, not SARS-CoV. SARS-CoV will attack only SARS-CoV, not chickenpox. Specificity. And the other, equally important, is what we call memory. It stores. It might vanish materially, but that memory retains itself somewhere in the system, the bone marrow and other systems. Specificity targets what it is meant to target, and memory, which retains, so that should that virus or bacteria reappear again on our doors and try to enter our system, the memory recognizes it, activates, and that fires off the system and tries to destroy it. Antibodies is one arm of this, what's called the adaptive immune system, and the T cell, as you just said, is the other. Antibodies are the ones that are generated in two waves, so to say. The first wave comes very fast, 7 to 14 days after the advent, after the intruder enters us. And this is the IgA M, the so-called. After this abates, it comes down naturally. The second wave begins to rise, the longer lasting IgG antibody, which begins around 14 to 21 days. The question that this study raises, and the main concern, is how long does this IgG last? 3 months, 6 months, as is seen commonly with the other four common seasonal cold causing coronaviruses, 229E, you have HKU1, and you have OC43. All these have been circulating with us for the last 3,000 years, and they cause seasonal common colds, are also part of the alpha and beta. Beta is the one that this thing, coronaviruses. Now, the antibodies generated by these, we have a lot of information on them because they have been around for a long, long time. That lasts between 3 to 6 months, and then it abates, thereby giving it the seasonality. They recur season to season, reinfections, as the four common cold causing coronaviruses. So this study almost parallels or hints at that pattern, which is known and nothing new or nothing alarming. That's probably what was to be expected. The other is the T cell, which we haven't really measured in terms of this study. This study really doesn't look at the T cell response. Now, the antibodies merely prevent the virus from binding. So they destroy the virus before it binds and enters the cell. However, if the virus succeeds in entering the cells because the antibodies have failed somehow, abated or waned, the second system is still around to help us, which we haven't really measured. It's difficult. The T cells, which are again helper and cytotoxic, or what's called the killer, they mount antibodies. They attack the cell in which the virus has already entered, and they destroy the whole cell, the killer cell. So all these systems are very complex. All this study tells us is that the antibodies have declined after 3 to 6 months, 3 months here, which is to be expected, as we have understood from the earlier models of the other common cold causing coronaviruses.
Yeah. Okay, that's with reference to other common cold causing coronaviruses. So, Dr. Lakshmi, as far as antibodies for COVID-19 is concerned, so what is the verdict on that? What are various studies, that are going around the world? What are they saying, and how effective are these antibodies?
Yeah, most of the studies which are occurred and which are there, like in the study, apart from study from UK, there is a Portugal study and other studies. Every study is giving us the same result that the antibody titers, they are coming down, they are waning. And this says that whatever antibodies we are producing, the titers are falling down, but whether the memory is retained or not is still not very clear. We need further studies and further information to be there to have a very clear picture what is going to happen. And second, most of our antibodies which are being produced, whether they are neutralizing antibodies or not, again, that is a separate question which we might be having. So right now, the evidence what we have from various places is pointing out that the antibodies develop and they wane, and especially if somebody has got a symptomatic infection, the antibody response is better. And somebody who is having a mild infection, the antibody response might not be that good. It might be because the T cells might have removed the virus, cleared the virus, even before the antibody system has been activated. So this is a hypothesis which has been proposed. But right now, the evidence is mild infections, they are not very good in mounting antibody response. Symptomatic and severe infections, the antibody response is good. And in any case, the waning is very much fast in the mild infections, and it is a bit slow in severe infections.
Okay, so that's the information as far as the antibodies for COVID-19 is concerned. So since we are talking about the efficacy of the antibodies and how it's waning over a period of time, so Professor Bajpai, does this mean that we may not see herd immunity as far as COVID-19 is concerned?
I don't think we are going to see herd immunity. There's going to be a gradual loss of immunity, and in the near future, there's no such thing. Sweden has done a very big experiment on this. They have not done a lockdown, and they have tried to go down, but they have very high mortality figures, although they are still sticking to the same narrative. But I don't think in the current evidence what it is coming forward is not showing any kind of move towards herd immunity. Every country has had second and third waves of COVID-19 in their population, and the Spain being one of the very earliest affected, there also there was a rapid wane in the antibody levels among the few studies from Spain. So I don't think there's going to be a herd immunity anytime soon, seeing the evidence.
All right. So that having been said, so Dr. Gurtu, as far as reinfection is concerned, if you look at the reinfection numbers in our country, it's negligible. So what does this say overall? Secondly, if someone is reinfected, does that mean that the virus will have less of an impact on that particular person?
Reinfection in true sense of the word means having proved it through finding a different genome in the virus that is reinfected has not been widely proved. There are cases, but not more than a couple, 4, 5, 6 cases throughout the world. In the truest sense of the word, what we usually pass off as reinfection is when after COVID infection, one redetects by RT-PCR RNA turning out positive again and again, sometimes and again. This is really not reinfection proved, because more often than not, the RNA we are picking up is an ancient fossil which is non-replicating RNA. RT-PCR is a very fast and a very sensitive and high amplifying sort of a test. Even one bit gets amplified, doubled every cycle. So therefore, just simply picking up RNA on RT-PCR doesn't mean that you have been reinfected. It could just mean that the old RNA, which is lying in a dead and non-transmissible form, has just been picked up, because it takes time for the body cells from the lowermost part of the lungs to rise up and clear all the dead cells with their viruses and RNAs in them, dead ones. So that process can take up to 1 to 2 to 3 months. So RNA showing up on RT-PCR does not equate with reinfection. Mostly it has been found to be dead, non-replicating, non-transmissible RNA. There have been few cases of genuine reinfections done on genomic analysis, proved to be different. Those are few. And the problem, anything that occurs in millions and millions of people, even a small signal will get amplified. So it appears as a big, huge problem. But just look at the perspective. 5-6 million people infected, even larger, if you look at the real thing, of which 4 or 5 cases proved throughout the world. So it's a small signal getting amplified hugely because the whole population sample size is huge in millions. So that's an illusion. So from a clinical perspective, as of today, it's not a cause of alarm. It's mostly probably the persisting RNA that we are picking up.
Okay. So, all right. So, Professor Lakshmi, since we are talking about this aspect now, we are talking about how antibodies are waning. Various studies around the world are telling us that, but yet we are not seeing too many cases of reinfection. Yes, there is a wave across the world, especially in Europe and US, that is the second and the third wave. There are several more people getting infected as of now. But the fact that we are not seeing reinfections, what does that really mean?
Not seeing the reinfection means 2 things. One, the infection which might be there because of reinfection might be very mild and it is not noticeable. Or it can be that the reinfection, it is providing some protection against the infection. That is why we are not seeing reinfection.
Right. Okay. So that is so since we are talking about how the antibodies may not last for too long, since we are talking about how previous coronaviruses have shown us that they keep recurring. So what is the best way forward as far as COVID-19 is concerned, Professor Bajpai? Do we need some kind of a vaccine, treatment, or a combination of both? What is going to be most effective as far as COVID-19 is concerned, or as far as SARS-CoV-2 is concerned?
what the present evidence shows is on both the paths, we are working on a two-pronged approach, the management as well as the vaccine. But to make it effective, you have to use both the approaches. For the vaccine, there's a lot of trials, and they have come into phase 3 trials, and with some what you call it success. And we hope to see a vaccine in the new year. But regarding the management part, yes, there have been a number of drugs, they have been tried, and they are showing some advantage, not showing a survival benefit. And these things are going on. Monoclonal antibodies are coming up, and I think they might provide an interim success story, because if they are directed towards the correct epitopes on the virus, that is the RBD, S1 RBD domain, which binds to the AC inhibitors, I think it can help. It can help, and the approach has to be two pronged. But the most important thing in this whole thing is the protection. Presently, until we have anything, masks, social distancing, all these things, they play a very important role. It has been seen time and again, and in many studies, that if you're taking these basic protection measures, it goes a long way in protecting you against the disease. While we are working on the vaccine and the management.
Right. So, Dr. Gurtu, since you're talking about treatment now, there have been several treatments that have been tried around the world: hydroxychloroquine, remdesivir, plasma therapy, and so on. And so there's so many things that have been tried around the world. It's all in the experimental realm. So when we are talking about treatment as a whole, what is the best way forward?
There is no one best way forward, I would think. There are many ways which have to run in parallel and in an integrated manner. Now, as was just said, that we need the two commonest, the broadest and clearest ways would be: one, prevention, vaccine; second, treatments. Now, in treatments, again, there are two things. One is the direct antiviral. You attack the virus using drugs. The target could be that part of the virus which actually helps in replication, or the RNA polymerase, those drugs, which are in the stages of development. As of now, none has shown a survival advantage, direct antivirals, so to say. The other is that we direct our therapies at the consequences of the attack by the virus, which are two: inflammation, hyperinflammation, and two, the coagulation, blood clotting within the small blood vessels. So inflammation and coagulation, inflammation, hyperinflammation, and the blood is clotting in. Against these two, we have, against the first, inflammation, we have dexamethasone, 10 days, 6 milligrams per day. And the other, against the clotting part, the thrombosis part, we have the low molecular weight heparin. These two combined have brought about a survival advantage, a reduction in mortality as an outcome, improvement in life, prolongation. Apart from the ways that we administer oxygen and the prone position, you put the body in a prone position, prone and awake, and ventilate. So these three strategies of oxygenation, dexamethasone against inflammation, and low molecular weight against the coagulation, the clotting, these three combined as of today have given us an aggregate survival advantage. Rest are in the realm of research, though actively being pursued. Thank you.
Okay. So, Professor Lakshmi, so what are the lessons that we have learned so far from the pandemic?
The main lessons what we have learned so far from the pandemic is the social distancing and mask help. And we have, right now, the prevention is the best way forward if we have to fight with the COVID. And the rest of the things, the treatment is what Dr. Guttu said. They are the three things which work, and the rest of the things, they are in experimental mode. And even the vaccine also, it might take time to come. And even if the vaccine comes, we don't know how effective it is, and then how long the protection will be there. And also, till the time we have the evidence gets accumulated, because the evidence what was there in the initial phase of the epidemic, it is changing. Like after 6 months, the entire evidence has been shown to be the things which were found to be effective initially were found to be ineffective later on. So as the evidence is accumulating, we are getting a varied result. So till that time, the evidence is, we get a concrete evidence about any thing, whether it is a medicine or a vaccine or anything. the best way to protect ourselves is prevention. That is just for maintain two things: use mask when you are in public places, maintain social distance, and do hand hygiene. Even
Since you're
just
talking,
simple soap and water is important.
okay, since we're talking about best way forward, Professor Bajpai, let's hear it from you as well. What is the best way forward?
Sometimes the best things are the simplest of things. And as Dr. Lakshmi has said, just said that they are very simple but very difficult to comply constantly. Anybody who has been constantly using a mask or hand hygiene and everything, you have to understand that it takes a lot of diligence to follow these. The strategy is simple, protection, but it's very difficult to follow. Don't lose heart. Don't go into fatigue, mask fatigue. You have to wear the mask. You have to do the hand washing. And these are the only things which are going to help us, especially during this festival season. We have to keep it low key. And that's my message. I wish everybody a very happy festive season, but with all the precautions.
All right. Ensure that you take care of yourself, follow all the guidelines and precautions is something that our panelists are suggesting day in and day out. The experts know best and they believe prevention is better than cure. It's an old adage as well for a reason. All right. Dr. Gurtu, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Oh, I'll just frame it with a time perspective. The attitude we have to have towards this has to be informed by that we are in it on a long roller coaster voyage up a very, very long road ahead. Patience and everything that has been said is all we need. It's a long, long voyage ahead. It's not going to come to an end very soon. So we have to be on the guard.
Absolutely. I think you couldn't have put it in any better way. The antibodies are waning. Of course, reinfections are low at this point in time, but it doesn't mean that the scare of the virus has gone away. Coronaviruses in the past have shown us that they don't go away. They are here to stay and they keep appearing every now and again. So the same is most probably going to be with the SARS-CoV-2 virus as well. So we need to be careful. We need to follow all precautions and we need to put our best way forward as a community and as a society. Only then can we defeat this pandemic. I'd like to thank all my guests at this point in time for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. And before we leave, we'd like to make an appeal to all our viewers as well. Like always, remember, we can defeat coronavirus by following a few simple steps. Wear a mask at all times when you step outside. Wash your hands and your face regularly and follow physical distancing as much as possible. A minimum of 6 feet is what has been prescribed. These simple and small steps can go a long way in defeating the virus. Stay safe, stay healthy.